guys, welcome back to Mystifying Miracles. A woman named Jessica Talbot. She had never really felt the experience of God in a supernatural way, you could say. That is, until she stepped off a curb in downtown Vancouver, right into the path of an oncoming bus. Stay tuned, we're going to get into this one. That day that Jessica stepped off that curb, it actually was a culmination of events that began a month prior, and it began 8,000 miles away. 4 years prior to that, her and her husband Kyle had taken their 36-foot sailboat and they went to Australia. They were able to travel to New Zealand and just see the lovely sights and just do it by sailing. And then they finally ended up in Sydney, Australia. However, their adventure, it would come to an abrupt halt. It was just after 11 p.m. on a night in March when a freak wave toppled their yacht. I mean, it rolled right over. And it's because, of course, there was a bad storm, but this wave, it came out of nowhere. Her husband, Kyle, had several injuries. To his head, neck, ribs, his kidneys, and he had back injuries as well. The boat itself, major damage. And in fact, as her husband was in pain, excruciating pain on the floor, can't talk, can't move, their boat is beginning to sink. Jessica says in that moment, that's when she heard a voice. And it said a few things to her, such as, God's not here. You're on your own now. And he doesn't care about you. Time? She didn't realize that voice was from a spiritual enemy. Before their boat had actually rolled, they're going through this storm, and Jessica remembers praying to God, please keep me and Kyle safe. They were scared to death. But because of her husband's injuries and the boat sinking, Jessica had to find the radio, which thank goodness she was able to get to it and call for help. And another blessing, an operator picked right up. There was a dangerous air-to-sea mission to save them over the next 2 hours, and it was successful, so they had to airlift Kyle to the nearest hospital. And once he was released, they were able to return to Sydney. And with all this going on and what had happened, Jessica had a memory lapse, and she all of a sudden, once they were in Sydney, realized, oh no, my visa expires in 2 days. She had no idea what she was going to do. So she went straight to the immigration office and she told them everything that had happened about her husband and his injuries, and he can't take care of himself and all those details. But unfortunately, the officer she was speaking to, he wasn't sympathetic at all. In fact, he told her straightforward, sorry, you're going to have to go back, renew the visa, and then you can return. He's like, but because of your husband, Kyle's extensive injuries, he can stay. Obviously, this broke her heart, having to leave her spouse behind and in the condition he was in, but what could be done? So 2 days later, she found herself on a plane back to Vancouver, where they were from. Jessica's mom and sister picked her up from the airport, and they were excited and happy to see her, that she was safe. And in fact, her parents, they were a little older and they were kind of, in failing health, I guess you could say. So they actually lived with Jessica's sister. So they all head back to her sister's home. Her sister begins to tell her a story that had recently happened. She's like, it's the weirdest thing. Some Australian man called me and he began to tell me that he had heard something take place on the radio and that Jessica had been in a bad storm, was missing at sea, and presumed dead. But as Jessica's sister's listening to this Australian man talk, she didn't believe it. She didn't feel her sister was dead, and she had no idea who he was, what was going on. She just knew one thing, and that was she didn't believe it. Well, Jessica began to think and wonder, and she was like, that's very weird. She's like, because no one knew where her and Kyle were until they called for help. So Why would anybody contact her family knowing all that and then telling them that they're probably dead? Why would anybody do that? And how could that be? She knew it couldn't have been the media telling that man that because no one knew they were missing yet. So this was just odd. Well, Jessica couldn't get it out of her mind over the next few days, and she just kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And she came to the conclusion that that had to be something spiritual that was trying to harm her and her husband. Once she was settled over the next few days after that, she applied for a renewal of her visa, and 10 days later, a letter came. She was ecstatic. I mean, she ripped that thing open so fast, only to be devastated because her application to renew, it had been denied. She cried and wept. She called Kyle up, told him it had been denied. What was she going to do? And I mean, he comforted her the best that he could, from so many miles away. And he told her that, hey, don't worry. I'll do what I can on my end. I'll hire a lawyer and I'll see what I can do. Once she hung up the phone, she knew that maybe, I need to say a prayer. But then all of a sudden, as soon as she thought that, the voice came back. And it said things like, God won't hear you, so don't look to him for help. And unfortunately, Jessica believed it. So she didn't end up praying. Jessica didn't want to keep moping over the next few days. So she decided to take a bus downtown just to get out, get some fresh air. She also wanted to just see, hey, it's been a good 4 or 5 years since I've been there. I want to see if, what's the same, what's changed. The bus ride was an hour, so it was kind of nice, just to sit there, see the sights, and just be with her own thoughts. It was actually good and a positive thing, Jessica says. And before she knew it, time had flown by. The day was almost done. She looked down at her watch and she noticed that, oh, great. I have time to run across the street, grab a coffee before I need to be back for the bus ride home. So, of course, she had to cross the street. She begins to step off the curb, and she also looks to her left to check for oncoming traffic. She didn't see any, so she proceeds to follow through with stepping off the curb. And this was the point where it was much too late now. She couldn't do a thing about it. She saw a huge bus barreling at a fast rate towards her, but it was coming from the opposite direction, the direction she didn't check. She didn't look the other way for traffic, and that's when it was about to hit her. She says this is the moment where just this amazing, fantastical, strong wind started to push her back. She says she could actually feel hands on both shoulders, and it wasn't like a whoop, tap. It was forceful with that strong wind pushing her back. Not only did the hands push her back, it actually lifted her back up onto the curb. It took a moment for Jessica to look around, regain her balance, and come to the realization like, what in the world just happened? She starts to look at the people around her and they don't notice. They're just going about their business. It was as if they didn't even see what just happened. She looks around at the trees and the grass and the flowers and nothing. Nothing's blowing in the wind. No evidence of a strong wind having just blown through there. So what in the world just happened? Jessica says she began to shake all over her body. And she knew in that moment as she began to shake that God had actually sent an angel to save her life and push her out of the way of that bus. She says it's as if a spiritual light had flooded her soul. And she knew in an instant, she says, that that voice she had been hearing from the night of the storm and previously that told her don't pray because no one will hear you, she knew that that was an actual demonic attack. And during her vulnerability, in which she was down and low and sad and having to leave her husband behind, that enemy, that demonic spiritual thing, it had actually whispered lies into her ears, and she believed them. But the good thing is, she was realizing this now. And immediately after she thought that, this unexplainable surge of gratitude filled her, and she began to profusely just thank God right there on the streets of downtown Vancouver. She knew that God had indeed actually heard her prayers that night of the storm. And she says from this moment on, she didn't hear those evil whispers again. They went away. Jessica had never felt so grateful in her life. She was happy. And shortly thereafter, Kyle, her husband, and Sydney, he was actually able to arrange a visa to get her back there. So it all turned out okay in the end. And an angel and/or God had saved her life that day as well in Vancouver, as well as the night of the storm. So what do you guys think about that? Just another cool story that, involves these angels, if you will, and God just saving people's lives. Like, I don't even know what to think about that. Every time I read a new one, I'm just amazed. Let me know what you guys think. And I just appreciate you for watching. Thank you so, so much. And I'm going to see you guys for the next one.